anyhow, as you were saying, so yeah, you were in Bentonville or in Arkansas, and then it seems like you worked at some pretty notable companies launching some of their products, and then eventually decided, I'm out.
Yep, yeah, that's it.
What? Why was that? Did you, like me? Did you? Well, not really. This is afterwards, but I read. Did you read something like the Overstory? And then.
Oh my gosh. A little bit. So I wish I've been trying to figure this out myself too, right? I wish I could point to one moment that was an aha moment for me that said, oh, dang, like now's the time to change my life. I don't think it was that. When I look back, there's, I think, been different points of intervention where I knew I was going to, well, hindsight's 2020. So looking back, I can tell you like a very clean story of when I first heard about X or how I changed my thinking about, food systems. Right. I think really for me, it was the triggering factor was the pandemic. As you said, I spent the better part of the last decade working at brands like Starbucks and Nestle. My last role was being part of the team that launched Chameleon Organic Coffee nationally here in the United States. And it was great fun, but being in the pandemic was also deeply stressful. Consumer products never slowed down in the US in the pandemic. I'm a parent, so I have a tiny human running around, and I suddenly was, both teacher and friend and spouse and mom and doing my day job. And I was involved in advocacy work within the organization for employee advocacy, specifically for LGBTQ folks, for women. And I think it all sort of layered on each other to be very, very overwhelming. I think the pandemic in general was deeply overwhelming. And then all of the work that I was doing started to feel quite intense. For me, that was the breaking point, and that was the intervention point where I had to stop and take stock of whether or not I was filling my own cup before I went into my workday. And I wasn't. For my own life, that wasn't working out. And that was the point for me to say, okay, I need to stop and find something else to do. And when I took that break, really I worked with a coach, I had a good support system, and I'm very fortunate to have had that. It reminded me that I've always been interested in sustainability. And at the same time in my professional career, I always stepped away every time I was offered a sustainability role. I chose not to take it. Part of that is because I wasn't super keen on how sustainability is being, and I think this is changing a bit, but how sustainability is typically thought of in gigantic organizations or even in large organizations, just your average large organization. It often becomes not core to your business decisions, but I think that exists on the side, a sort of auxiliary, tertiary thing that you have to take care of in order to have the right marketing message, have the right communications message, make sure your policy is aligned. But the business decision itself is not tied to sustainability in a way that would break the business if you moved away from sustainability, if that makes sense.
Right, it does. It's interesting how I'd like to touch on two parts actually. So one is just getting education in sustainability. So I'm currently trying to develop a next gen vegan protein bar at the moment. And that was born because I wanted to get into something else. I've been doing e-commerce for a while, and the Overstory definitely pushed me over the edge to wanting to be part of the solution. And I looked at a couple of schools to say, okay, could I go get a master's or do 1 or 2 years of, real formal education? But I live in Southern Europe, and I had no intention to want to move to London or some, random US state to do so. And there was nowhere I could find that had a virtual class that would allow me to enroll. I must have emailed faculty from all sorts of universities. And if they even got back to me, it was an arduous journey to discuss with these people what I was trying to do. Like, it really was like the walled garden was up and in full effect in academia. And I think that's a real shame because, I would like to do something that I know is giving back and making a difference. And so part of it was, okay, I'll start this just a vegan protein bar that I would want to eat. That's not just for, people working out all the time. It's for the mom on the go, but just has more nutrients and all of these things. And this podcast, though, it's not going to be only centered towards sustainability and climate. There's just so many other voices out there that are telling people to eat meat all the time that I figured I can at least throw my voice into the ring. And so I would love to hear how you work with a coach through your transition, and then how you ended up with Ojaswe.
Yeah. Good questions. But before I dive into the answers, I want to acknowledge and echo what you've gone through, right? I think there is similar to you, I did look at programs that were in more accredited universities to see if there is a way for me to have formal education around sustainability and the methods and means and things of that nature. A couple of things. I think student debt is real. I have 2 master's degrees and I'm still paying off student debt from them. But the reason I share that is because these programs are not always accessible, either by cost or by logistics or just life situations. What I've become hopeful about is that there are places like Terra.do. I don't know if you've heard of them.
I have, and I haven't looked too much into it, to be honest. So please tell me more.
Yeah, so I love Terra's program. They have a flagship Learning for Action program, which is for professionals from wherever they are in their career to come and learn about climate change as a problem, and to understand how to work through their own skills or with their own skills and contribute to the world of climate. So I find programs like Terra.do's program incredibly hopeful, and their goal is amazing too. I have not done Learning for Action, but I did do Terra's farm school. So for me, the other piece about seeking learning was, as I grow older, I think I'm moving more and more, and I've had some sort of leaning in this direction anyway for all of my life, I think, moving more and more from what's academic and theoretical to how does this apply in daily life? What does this mean when I make a choice at a grocery shelf? Or what does this mean when I'm parenting my child and need to say something or frame something up for her about how we live in the world, right? And I was looking for programs that had more of a practical bent. And so my challenge in that space too is, yes, Ivory Tower, tons of really good, important, worthwhile research. How do you take that into, especially when you're in the liberal arts and not in applied math or applied science? How do you take that into action? And I couldn't find a program that would fit both logistics and cost and me not having to relocate my entire life and give this practical application point. So long-winded way of saying, I hear you, and I think it's a very real problem. I think the way that specifically in the area of climate, what I'm seeing more and more of is this sort of grassroots mutualist action from not just young people, but professionals who have a decade or so under their belt, who are coming together and saying, okay, sure, I may not be able to make this my career, but how do I incorporate some level of climate impact into my daily work or my daily life? And working with a coach for me was a refining process. Like for me, it was looking inward and figuring out how do I know more about myself, and the more, aptly so, I think the more I started to learn about or work with my coach about what are the things that I value in my life? How have I demonstrated those values? And if I haven't, then if there's a disconnect between what I say I value and how I'm living my life, how do I bridge that gap? Or do I have to go back and re-examine my values? And the more I learned about these different mechanisms to think through my own life, the less I felt like I knew. I was like, good heavens, this is a bit of a nightmare.
That is great. If I can intersect for a moment, because
please.
I think in the world of coaches and what I call coaches, or like life coaches, or I think there's a huge spectrum of quality, and it's easy to dismiss a lot of these trainers, people. And what I've been thinking about is that, because I really could have used someone like that, from around 2019 to, even in 2021, because I had sold a couple of e-commerce companies, brands that I had built, and I really didn't know what I was going to do with myself. Like like everyone during that period, you research a little bit into crypto and see how much you like it or don't like it. And then you also think, okay, well, I'll do some startup investing. And then you realize the limits of that after learning some. But finding what you really want to do and stepping into it, I really only started considering these big questions maybe December of last year. And there was a friend of mine, and she's also trying to transition from a role as a financial fiduciary in Toronto into something with climate action. And it just happened that she and I connected, and she asked some of those questions because she's working with a coach. So it seems I've been working indirectly with people's coaches. Mm-hmm. And it helped me quantify, like, yeah, I do want to do something that has an impact. And the limits I ended up finding is that I don't want to do something where I have to raise a ton of money. I don't want to, because then I'm beholden to those shareholders, and that becomes like a bit of a hamster wheel from friends that I've went through it. Even though I think if you have a great idea, like there is a definite necessity to raise money, and it's helpful. And I also didn't want to move. And so I kind of had to like make my box here and then slowly bring it in to try to understand what optionality I had. And so I'm curious, through your search, which any of these looking inward searches are, not without their challenges. How did you decide on oh-jus-wee and what exactly it would involve? And congratulations on finding something, because that is a really difficult time.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. I remember having a moment of panic while I was working with my coach, because I knew I wanted something with impact. And I think I had all this pressure on. In parallel, I was reading, I had become exposed to drawdown over the last 4-ish years, even before I quit. So I had been reading a ton about climate. I'd been reading about the solutions proposed in Project Drawdown. I started to despair about not having a technical background or education, because it does feel like, thank you. I'm glad you empathize. It does feel, I think, outside looking in, like climate is something for the scientists to solve. Like you read about direct air capture or amazing ways to do carbon sequestration, and it feels so unapproachable if you are a layperson, which I 100% am a layperson. So I remember having this deep moment of panic, which was, I want to have an impact. I know I want it to be in the space of climate, but I don't know how to do it, and I don't just want it to be. Yes, I'm making good choices for my family, but how does that scale? Like, I didn't want to, I think sphere of influence was something that I was thinking about pretty deeply.
Right. Sorry, that's just like a funny way to have to compare things. And it really tells you, like, again, to not go into a soapbox on capitalism, but it's like, I'm really making a good good decision for my family, but how does this scale?
100%.
Like those two questions are a bit hilarious and probably super painful.
So painful. So painful in so many ways. And I think for me, I had to first acknowledge that I wasn't going to, because the other piece is this, you're right, capitalist, but also cultural, and by cultural, I mean like just family pressures and what you see around you in the society of what professional success looks like. And for me, working in a kitchen or working with a food product wasn't something I'd ever considered professional success, because it does feel, and working with a coach for me, Michael, was a process of unlearning so much of that, right? And unlearning what professional success means, unlearning what we call skilled labor versus not skilled labor, and what does it mean to create a food product that it would push me back into the world of consumer goods. And there is, much like you described the hamster wheel of taking investment, I think there is there's the tendency when you present as a CPG product, as a consumer packaged product, to say, okay, this quarter you made X, next quarter you have to grow by X.2, the quarter after that you have to have another 10% growth, and it's a never-ending cycle of growth. And
Right.
that just did not sit. Everything I was reading, everything I was learning about donut economics, about why our world is in the state it is, about this notion of extractive capitalism versus level of mutualism, I couldn't find, that was my big breaking moment to say, okay, maybe I don't make an impact. And it's kind of egotistical, right? But I think working with a coach, my biggest learning was, oh, so I'm only a tiny speck of humanity and I don't have to be the next Facebook? What?
Yeah.
Stunning. And letting go.
In aggregate, we're quite powerful. And I don't think enough of us understand that message because, like you said, it seems like such a heavy lift to help the climate, especially if there are people, even laymen, like probably like me. You seem to be in it now, so you're less layman now. And whereas you understand enough to realize how messed up it all is, and to think that other people are going to solve it is a bit of a fantasy. And so we have to do the small things that we can. So